Ever wondered how variables work in Java? Well, think no more. Variables are one of the fundamental elements in any programming language, and Java is no exception. They are like containers, or more aptly, digital lockers where we store various types of data. This could be anything: numbers, characters, strings, or even more complex data types. In programming, we don't just store data, we manipulate it, and that's where variables come in handy. They help us hold on to that data while we perform operations on it. Imagine trying to bake a cake without bowls to hold your ingredients. That would be messy, wouldn't it? That's how messy programming could get without variables. In the world of Java, understanding variables is a ticket to mastering the language. It's like learning the ABCs before diving into the world of literature. So buckle up, my friend. To understand better, delve deeper into the types of variables in Java. Java has 3 types of variables. Do you know what they are? Let's delve into them one by one. First, we have local variables. These are defined inside methods, constructors, or blocks, and are only visible within the scope of that method, constructor, or block. Once you exit the method, the variable is gone. Poof! It's like a secret agent that only exists for the duration of a mission. Local variables do not have a default value, so they must be declared, and an initial value must be assigned before the first use. Next, we have instance variables. These are declared inside a class but outside a method. Unlike the secretive local variables, instance variables are visible for all methods in the class. They hold values that must be referenced by more than one method, constructor, or block, or essential parts of an object state. Think of them as the backbone of a class, holding it together. If a value isn't assigned to them, they take a default value depending on their data type. Finally, we have class or static variables. These are declared within a class outside any method with the keyword static. They are unique and only a single copy of each one exists, regardless of how many instances of the class exist. Imagine them as the celebrities of the class, unique, standalone, and not tied to an instance. They're useful when you need consistent data across all instances of a class. Like instance variables, if not assigned a value, they take a default value. So there you have it. Local variables, the secret agents that exist only within their method. Instance variables, the backbones of a class, consistent across methods but unique to each instance. And static variables, the celebrities, consistent across all instances of the class and not tied to any specific one. Now that you know the types, you're probably wondering how to declare and initialize variables in Java. But hold your horses, we'll get into that in the next scene. Declaring and initializing variables in Java is a piece of cake. Ready to learn how? Let's dive right in. First, let's talk about declaring a variable. Declaring a variable is like saying, "Hey Java, I'm going to need a space in memory to store some data." It's like claiming a parking spot for your car. You do this by specifying the type of data the variable will hold and then giving it a name. For instance, if we want to store an integer, we'd write int my number. Here, int is the data type and my number is the name we've given to our variable. Now, initializing a variable is like parking your car in that spot you've claimed. It's when you assign a value to your variable for the first time. So if we want my number to hold the value 5, we'd write my number equals sign 5. And there you have it. Our my number variable has been declared and initialized. It's important to remember that declaring and initializing are 2 separate steps. You can't park your car without claiming a spot, right? You declare first, then initialize. However, in Java, you can also declare and initialize a variable in the same line of code. For example, int my number equals sign 5 does both tasks at once. It's like claiming a parking spot and parking your car there immediately. Also, it's crucial to know that once a variable is declared, its data type can't be changed. It's like once you've claimed a parking spot for a car, you can't park a boat there. If my number is an integer, it will always be an integer. You can change the value, but not the type. And that's it. Declaring and initializing variables in Java is as simple as that. You've just taken a big step in your Java programming journey. Remember, declaring is claiming your spot in memory and initializing is parking your data in that spot. Great. Now you know how to declare and initialize variables, but how do we use variables in Java? Variables are of no use if we don't know how to use them, right? So let's dive right into it. Imagine variables as little storage boxes within your computer's memory. They hold different types of data that your Java program can use and manipulate. But how do we use these variables in Java? Well, we can use variables in various ways, such as in operations, functions, and methods. Let's start with operations. You can use variables in mathematical operations. For instance, if you have two variables, a and b, you could add them together to create a third variable, c. This would look something like int c = a plus b. Easy, right? Next, let's talk about functions. Functions are blocks of code that perform specific tasks. They can take variables as inputs, known as parameters, and return a value. For example, a function could take two integers as input and return their sum. Methods, on the other hand, are similar to functions but are associated with objects in object-oriented programming. Just like functions, methods can also take variables as parameters and return a value. Another interesting point to note is that the value of a variable can change during the execution of a program. This is one of the most powerful features of variables. For example, you might have a variable count that starts at 0. As your program runs, you could increment count each time a certain condition is met, allowing you to keep track of how many times that condition occurred. However, it's important to remember that while variables are powerful tools, they aren't without their rules and restrictions. For instance, once you've declared a variable as a certain type, you can't change its type later in your code. Also, you need to initialize your variables before you use them. Variables are indeed powerful tools in Java, but remember, there are rules to follow. So, keep these points in mind as you continue your journey into the world of Java programming. In Java, rules are not meant to be broken, especially when it comes to variables. Let's dig into the rules that govern the use of variables in Java. We've got 5 essential rules to follow. Rule 1. Variable names are case-sensitive. This means height and height are 2 different variables. It's important to maintain consistency while naming your variables to avoid confusion. Rule 2. A variable name must start with a letter, a $, or an underscore. Numbers can be used in variable names, but not at the beginning. So, my variable 1 is valid, but my variable is not. Rule 3. Reserved words or keywords in Java can't be used as variable names. Words like int, for, while, if, and so on are reserved for specific functions in the language, and using them as variable names will cause errors. Rule 4. Variable names cannot contain white spaces or special characters except the underscore and $. My variable or my @variable are not valid variable names in Java. Rule 5. Variable names should be descriptive and meaningful. While X and we might be technically correct, they don't tell us anything about what the variable holds. Something like student age or employee salary is much more understandable. Breaking these rules can lead to serious errors in your code. If you try to use an invalid variable name, Java will throw a compile time error and your program won't run. Even worse, if you use a non-descriptive variable name, you might end up with a program that runs but does something completely different from what you intended. So, why are these rules so important? They help maintain consistency in your code, making it easier to read, debug, and maintain. They also prevent the misuse of reserved words and special characters, ensuring that your code behaves as expected. Remember, in the world of Java, rules are your friends. They guide you, ensuring your code is structured and predictable. By understanding and following these rules, you'll be well on your way to becoming a proficient Java programmer. Following these rules will keep your code clean and error-free. Variables in Java are not as complicated as they seem, right? We've spent the last few minutes delving into the world of Java variables, and hopefully, you're now feeling more comfortable with the concept. We've taken a journey through the different types of variables in Java, from primitive to reference variables, each with its unique characteristics. We've also explored the process of declaring and initializing variables, understanding that this is how we tell Java what kind of data we're working with and what we want to store. From there, we saw how to use these variables in our code, leveraging their values to perform various operations and functions. And let's not forget the rules for using variables. These guidelines help us maintain good coding practices and avoid errors. They're not just rules, but the best practices that seasoned programmers swear by. Remember, mastering the use of variables is a significant